Good afternoon or good morning or both. I'm calling this third meeting of the Education Foundation Subcommittee to order. And I want to thank everybody for their time this afternoon, this morning, as well as previously and into the future. I think as we've done before, and Ginger, if you would you put the statement up so we will have dutifully reviewed it as we are supposed to do every meeting?
Yes, can you see my screen, Dan?
I can. I hope everybody else can. Yeah, I'll just do a quick voiceover if people would take a minute to look at it. One thing I would want to call out is that the Department of Ed has asked us to know that the work is not intended to reflect on the current BEP formula. And I should note, and Ginger, if you want to add to this, many of you may have already heard the current legal case was put on hold, on a pause from now until at least October of 2022. And so our proceedings will not affect that case. And in the words of Commissioner Schwinn, that's a big step forward. So we are looking at creating a new formula. That's our task, but the existing lawsuit is now put on hold or on pause. Just a quick other couple of reminders. Public's encouraged to submit comments in writing. I know a number of us have had meetings with groups, and to encourage those groups to put that information or help them put it on the website is a good step forward. We are, as members of this committee, responsible for looking at public comment. I think we all received Monday night a big batch. We will not make that part of today's meeting. If you saw it and had time to look through it, great, include that. But we will make our fourth meeting. We are hoping January 3rd, a second batch. And so we'll take the time at our fourth meeting to make sure we've added anything we've learned from the public comment that we've read. Then, as a quick reminder, all of these things are subject to the Tennessee Public Records Act. And just finally, and just so we're all aware that our recommendations will be considered, but there's no assurance that they will ultimately be included in what the state legislature does. Ginger, is that everything we need to say on that? I think it is.
Yes, I think so. I don't think there was anything on there that you missed. I would just encourage each of you guys to make sure that you have read through all of those, because this is an important part of each of our meetings, that we do want to make sure that we've started each one with this statement for just, kind of standard setting purposes, to make sure we're all on the same page and have those reminders each time.
Great. All righty. Having done that, let me call roll formally. Scott Bacon. Senator Richard Briggs.
Here.
Welcome. Katie Kaur.
Here.
Stan Harville.
Here.
Representative David Hawk.
I am here.
Chris Lestos.
I'm here.
Lisa Trail.
Here.
Lynn Volz.
Here.
Amanda Waddell.
Here.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Ginger, do you want to, that's our agenda. We are now halfway through it. Would you, Ginger, take us quickly through the meeting reviews, and then I'll give us a little bit of a roadmap of the rest of the hour.
Absolutely. So again, as we've talked about each time, just asking you guys to look at those materials ahead of time. I know we're trying to get those out to you as quickly as we can, so you don't have as much lead time as you'd like to be able to look at those, but just when you can, just at least skim over those quickly to kind of prepare for the conversation ahead of time. And then each time, bring the conversation that you're hearing from your stakeholder groups, bring that into the conversation to help inform the thoughts, the comments, really the recommendations that this group wants to bring forth, that you bring those to the table. I will charge you guys over the next few weeks with really leveraging your community groups, leveraging individual conversations to really think about what are those different categories of funding that we want to see put into this formula, thinking beyond the must-haves, the nice-haves, the should-haves, but also thinking about the base, the weight, the outcomes, the additional funding pieces, which we're going to talk more about today. But I would encourage you guys, as you're having conversations, whether it's group conversations, it's individual conversations, to have people send their thoughts over to that dedicated email address, that tnedu.funding@tn.gov. So we also have a public record of that. If you want to share those over with me, I will also make sure that those get to that tnedu.funding email address so that we have public record of that. So those of you who have shared those, thank you so much. And we're making sure that they make their way over there as well. But leveraging your expertise as well as what you know from your communities to be true and needed for this conversation. And so just reminding you of that as we go through, that you think about the perspective that you bring, but then also that broader perspective of the communities that you represent. I know you all know this, but you can also have conversation with each other in between. I think some of you all have been doing that, but that's something that you can access as well, whether it's emails or phone calls or whatever, you can do that also to keep this conversation going. And kind of already talked through this, but we'll just continue to think through how we start building on or building out this new funding versus really revising what currently exists, because we really want to know what are those possibilities for the future.
Quick question, Ginger. As we hold meetings, it needs the information from the meeting that needs to have the names of the participants, one name of the participant. How does that get entered?
So when you're sending that over to that TNEDU funding email address, we would encourage you, if it's an individual you're talking to, have them submit that. That's probably the easiest. Or if you just send their name and what those comments, that feedback is. If it's a group, if you can just share who that group is, like who they represent, that works as well. So you may not have, if you have a list of like attendees, you can include that, but we want to make sure we know whose voice is represented in the feedback that you're sharing.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Okay, just so people know what's on the road ahead. Here's what I'm thinking for a roadmap for the next 50 minutes. We're going to look at some overall feedback that the department has received and see if we agree with it. These aren't line items. These are more general thoughts about the formula. Then we're going to look at the list for the base that we created and decide if there's some things on reflection we've want to add and maybe even subtract or move to a off the must-have list. And then we're going to try and be brave and start to prioritize those items that may be really difficult, that will be very difficult. After we do that, we'll look at the weights. Again, look at are there weights that we want to add, and then try and prioritize, then additional dollars and try and prioritize, and outcomes and try and prioritize. We may get through all that in an hour, but if not, I think it's January 6th, 2022, we'll come back and finish up what we don't get done. So that's the plan. Thanks for being here. Ginger, the next slide, good. So here's the voiceover I would give just for this. These are examples of overall feedback about the student-based formula. There are 4 specific overall comments. They aren't line items, but that's what's been suggested. I guess I'd first ask, are we in agreement around these 4? First one is no district should receive less state funding. than they have received through the current BEP. The second is maintaining flexibility. The third is ensuring that whatever is currently funded outside of the BEP is in the new formula, so things don't get dropped off like this, the retake of the ACT. It's an example. And then the last is the local match should be stable for the next 3 to 5 years. So those are 4 overall comments. They aren't line items per se, but they're sort of conceptual. Do we agree with those? And is there something we'd want to add to that list?
Dan, if I could, this
Sure,
is Dave.
please. Yeah.
And thank you. And I think in a generic way, I think I can agree with all those, but I'm struck by some interesting comments in our conversation at our last meeting about the base and line item number 2 there, maintain flexibility for local district budgeting. And we have always been a state that takes pride in having local control on investments of education and giving locals the discretion to spend. But the conversation really piqued my interest last meeting as we were talking about do we mandate some of these things to be funded? And I'll use an example of years gone by. The legislature may have intended to give and I'll use this as one example, a 4% pay increase to educational professionals, to teachers. And then by the time they got back to the districts, it was watered down. It was spread out over some of the non-funded BEP formula positions, and what we touted as a 4% pay raise ended up being a 2 3/4% pay raise because it got spread out. So I can be fine with the list that we've got, but just to know that to expound on what we had in conversation in the last meeting, that is something I'm hearing from John Q. Public that may be concerns. So thank you for letting me do that, but I can be fine with the 4 we've got listed.
Thank you for that. Other comments? These, and just to be clear, these came from other, I assume, Ginger, other committees? That's what the department's hearing?
This is coming from other subcommittees, as well as all of the town halls, all of the feedback that's been sent to that email address and the social media, the Twitter town halls as well. So this is really a culmination of everything that we've received and what's kind of surfaced out of that.
So I'm hearing people are, comfortable with these 4. Unless anybody wants to add something, I'm going to take silence as agreement, a dangerous step, but we'll do that and keep moving. Katie, you want to say something? Good.
I want just real quick. I mean, I think I'm in agreement with all of these. I think the local match being stable is incredibly important to districts to be able to predict and plan. I do think that unpacking the nuance of what these mean and, putting something like 3 to 5 years on there, I think that's a little tricky, like being, so it's going to come kind of the general premise, the general intent of all 4 of these, I think is correct. I think how they are unpacked and what each one includes is going to be a little bit more complicated. So just flagging that in agreement in general, but not sure the details would remain consistent with the intent.
Dan, can I speak for just a minute?
Please. Yeah.
I don't know that this is the place to say this, but these are, and this may not be the location in our feedback to all the committees, but what I'm hearing over and over and over in terms of a foundational component of funding is that funding that comes from tax dollars to stay with the public education system. I'm hearing that over and over and over. And so, there's discussion about providing funds for parents to use as they would choose to private schools and that sort of thing. And foundational to public funding, I'm hearing this from a variety of individuals, in fact, and a variety of businesses and school, and also school-related individuals, but that publicly generated funding, tax dollars, should stay within the public education system.
I see some head nodding, but I'm not sure where the group is. That may be something we want to talk about a little more now. Yeah, please, Amanda.
I've heard the same thing, so pretty much verbatim.
Okay.
Katie, you're hearing the same thing in Nashville?
I'm hearing the same thing as well.
Dan, I'd like to add a little different perspective on it from our business perspective. You know, we're in the business of obtaining funds from private individuals, from private businesses, from grantors who are either business, corporate, private, family grantors, and they're giving to public education. And when they do that, they would expect that the foundation of that educational system is from public funds. And so from that perspective, I personally am concerned about those public funds being used to support private schools or individuals choosing private schools. And I have no objection to that, to an individual choosing to send a child to private school. But from our business perspective, I would have a difficult time explaining that change to private donors to public education.
Senator Briggs?
Yes, and I'd just like to echo what's already been said about that, because I'm hearing a lot of that also. I did have one question about item number 3 that says ensure that whatever is currently funded outside of the BEP is included in a new formula. And I was wondering if someone could clarify what that actually means. Let me give you an example. I believe, and we may have some people from Maryville or Oak Ridge, or this could even include Knox County. If you have a city or county funding source that raises taxes or gives substantial additional dollars to their school system, does that mean that the BEP would eventually be funded down to compensate for that? In other words, it would dilute the local dollars that goes into public education, because some of those would be taken out and used elsewhere. Thank you.
Ginger, do you have an easy answer for that, or at least a clear answer for that, or do we need to come back to it?
Yeah, I think I can address that one. So this piece of feedback is specifically addressing those additional positions and those sorts of things that districts are paying for that go beyond what the BEP is funding. When we think about if a certain number of students generate a position and districts are then needing to provide additional positions, then this statement is saying that they would like to see those additional positions included in that formula. Or if they're providing, and I'm just throwing this out as an example. So for instance, if they needed to provide some additional teachers or for RTI or what have you, and they're paying for those things out of their local funds because they just don't have enough through their current state funding, then they would like to see those things transitioned over. And it wouldn't, my understanding is it would not be for those, a lot of those, like you mentioned, the Maryville and the Oak Ridge example, where you might have a lot of other local things built on top of that. But this is more like to have school, we need these additional positions, additional things to make that happen. And right now they might be supplementing locally to actually be able to make that happen.
Yeah, thank you. I know particularly in the counties that are the net donors to the system, sometimes, and there may be confusion in understanding exactly how the BEP formula would work in the future. There's concern that anything that was done locally there really wouldn't be as much money that would be allocated that would go to education, because there would be a decrease in what would come in from the BEP. But that's some of the concerns that I've heard. Thank you, though.
So, sorry, Representative.
And thank you, Dan. And Dr. Briggs allows me to give some context to my earlier comments that I made about item number 2 on the list. As we have this discussion, my interest in what I'm hearing is that we need to make sure that the state properly invests in areas where we are mandating spending. So that, I don't want to seem like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but if we're going to mandate that you have a response to intervention position in relationship to this grade level, or again, I'll just use that as an example, then the state needs to put their money where their mouth is and fund that. So if we are going to make the requirements of a school district to do this, and this, then those items should be funded at a state level, as opposed to the local funding having to come in and supplement whatever state funding comes in. So if that can put some clarity on my initial comments. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. So here's what I'm thinking, is just to keep us moving forward. Maybe we need to clarify. We're in agreement on these 4. Looks like we may want to clarify, or when we do our final report, those second and third bullets. I thought I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there was also, to Lynn's point, a desire to have an overall comment that the public dollars raised through public taxes should stay in the public system. And I thought I counted at least 5 or 6 people on this group saying that's where they are. So, Ginger, because all hard work ends up down towards you on this, if you would be willing to try and capture that for us to look at next time. And I know a number of people, and I'll bet Lynn would be, anybody and all of us would be willing to kibitz once you draft it. But let's see if we could have that as an overall for the next time. Is that okay?
Yes, I have that. So some notes from this section that I'll include in what I share over with the Commissioner's office is that overall this group is in agreement with these statements in general, but further details would be needed to really fully understand the intention of each statement. We're hearing lots of feedback from stakeholders that public generated funds should stay within the public school system. And then we should be properly investing in areas that are mandated by the state. Is all of that represent the conversation that was just had? And did I miss anything?
Sounds great.
Okay.
All right. When we're going to keep moving, appreciate that. We will, of course, come back to these things before we do a final report. Let's go to the next slide. Ginger, thank you. So just context, the last time we met, we developed a really good list of resources we believe that have to be included in Tennessee's new funding formula. I'm hoping that you have had a chance, but if you have not, this is a good moment just to review our list. And we're going to try and answer 2 questions. One is there anything on reflection you'd like to add? And 2, is there anything that we should move from the must-have to the should-have? So look at our list, and Ginger, are you able to put that up for us all to look at it? It's in the packet. Maybe that would help people. There it is.
I'm going to show the summarized list just because that fits all on one screen, but if you need me to scroll up, let me know.
That's great. Chris, you want to ask a question or make comment?
Make comment if I could. I just want to make sure and confirm. I see technology on there, but it's one thing that's definitely been talked about here in Knox County, and how the BEP, or at least the new funding formula, will include funding for virtual education or digital classrooms, especially going forward. So making sure that's clearly defined here as a must-have.
Thanks. Other things to add to the list?
Other things to add to this list, Dan, or the 5
Yes.
priorities on the slide? Okay.
No, to this list. This is our list, to this list.
Okay.
And Chris, I have made a note on that on my other note sheet. This is actually our recommendation sheet that I submitted for meeting 2. So I don't want to make edits to that one, but I did make note of your addition. So I have that.
I might change the instructional and or behavioral coaches to 2 separate line items, because I think those are different concepts that would be, I would be hesitant to lump those together. One might be a must-have, one might be a nice-to-have.
I'd like to add or suggest a few things. I had the privilege last week of meeting with 8 teachers who are in their first 5 years of teaching, and they all work on our highest need schools in Chattanooga, and a number of things that they mentioned that seemed to me to make sense. One is within the professional development, training in cultural competency and cultural responsiveness. So to call that out. They also urged equitable early gifted testing as part of that needs to happen, as a must-have. They also called out the need for equitable field experiences, that so many of their schools do not have the opportunity to go on field trips because the dollars aren't there, but other schools have those opportunities. And there was also an interesting comment, interesting to me, was the importance of healthier, higher quality meals that are provided. And that was another one. And then a concern about the status of media centers and updated libraries. And I think we sort of have that, but they called that out. Their list was created de novo. They didn't see our list, and then at the end of the meeting, I gave them our list just to get comments. So those were all things from people in the field that made sense to me. I'd suggest them with respect to this group, and we could look at them and decide if they should be in the must-have. Sure, please. Senator. Sorry, you're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. I was looking at all of these, and the one that I think has to be in the must-have is the very first one. We got to have high quality, qualified teachers, and then pay them appropriately. And the other one that caught my attention, and I'm not real sure because I'm not a professional educator, so I don't always speak the proper language, but that literacy and numeracy materials, I'm not really sure what that means, but we're talking about about libraries and all of these other things, and I really, I'm just horrified that we haven't really mastered the basics. It's the old reading, writing, and arithmetic. And when I hear that 2/3 of our third graders can't read at grade level, to me, that's a crisis. And a lot of these other things are really nice social issues on mental health and social workers and counselors and internet access. But if you can't read, we're not meeting our obligation to students. I mean, we have to have these kids reading by the third grade. And I think a must-have is whatever that would be to be certain that our resources are focused on having the children know how to read. But because all of us, I think if we looked at what we know, 98% wasn't what someone told us in school, but it's what we've read throughout our lives. And if you can't read, you're really going to have a lack of knowledge about a lot of things and have a hard time keeping up. So I think something to assure that our kids by the third grade are reading at grade level is of paramount importance.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I thought I heard almost the comment to focus on the priority of that should be at the top of the list. And if, not to say others aren't must-haves, but that the most important must-have is that. Is that right?
That's what literacy is all about.
Sure.
I mean, how to read. And we
Yep.
know that already we're failing 2/3, not failing in grade, but we're failing what we're supposed to be doing if 2/3 of our kids by the third grade can't read adequately.
Thank you. Katie, I saw your comment in the chat. Do you want to just vocalize it?
Sure. I think that the senator was saying some really important things there, and could not agree more that teachers have to be the #1 priority. And then for me, high quality instructional materials in general is the priority, and literacy certainly is the #1 thing in that, but I would just broaden the language there to not narrow it to just literacy and numeracy, but in general, all the materials we provide should be incredibly high quality, and that's not the case right now.
Other things we want to add to this list?
Dan, it seems like our list is heavy toward upper grades. I would say that, pre-K, and even before, Senator makes a good point about, our third grade reading level, but, again, I'll throw 80% of brain architectures formed before the age of 3. That's not a school system problem. That's a parenting problem. So that is something that's going to have to be attacked in some way, shape, or form. And I don't know what that is, but we've got to perhaps catch those kids earlier in life, so that they have a better base to begin school, so that they have a chance for success by the time they're in third grade.
Are you suggesting that we should add funded pre-K to our list of must-have?
I think that is essential, yes.
Representative, is that, I'm sorry, I've lost track. Is that, and I'm really comfortable if people hear a silence to jump into it. I know I should do a better job, but this is hard to do when I'm sort of looking across 10 little squares. So, Representative, please.
That was my little hand raising there.
Yeah.
We had some innovative programs this past summer, and to address both Dr. Briggs and Stan's comments, the summer reading programs, and we're still getting measurements from that, but initial indications are that they were very positive in 2-week camps, 3-week camps, 6-week camps. And I use the word camps in air quotes, but it was to focus on younger child reading proficiency. And what I'm hearing anecdotally from school districts and from kids that are in school with my daughter is that it has been positive. So again, looking at a must-have versus would be nice to have, since we have had a positive, in my mind, we've had a positive experience with these summer programs. Is that something that we push for in a reformed BEP, that we create a more robust summer reading program and fund it through the BEP? And I'll throw that out there for the committee and really for the larger conversation.
Dan, I'd like to speak to that. I think what we've seen in summer camps and summer programs is really effective interaction, and it's because they're smaller groups and there's a lot of personal contact students are receiving. So yeah, we see great gains with summer programs. So if we have a priority for funding, I understand the necessity, or I understand the desire for pre-K intervention. However, if we have a certain amount of funding and we do a good job with K-12, I think that our priority has to be there. That's my opinion. That's sort of what I hear. I hear a lot of advocacy for pre-K public funding. But the idea of parenting is also critical, and this committee can't address that, you know, or they can't intervene in that. And I understand that a lot of children are not getting read to anymore at home. But I think if we have a certain amount of money and we have to focus, I think K-12 has to be our focus. I'm not saying we should ignore pre-K maybe, but I think the focus has to be K-12. I'd like to hear some dialogue on that, I guess.
I just agree with where Stan was coming from, that I don't know how we're going to ever solve. I mean, there's so much, education is so complicated, and I don't see a path forward without addressing some of the things that students are coming to school with, that we can't control all of them, but we certainly can provide robust learning experiences for kids before kindergarten. And for me, it's part of the whole package. I mean, I guess you could say, well, then why don't we fund post-secondary? And you could kind of keep going. So I understand where you're coming from, Lynn. But I've seen the success of high quality pre-K programs and what that can do for the future of those kids when they get to the K-12 environment. And to me, it's just so connected. But I understand where you're coming from.
What I'm wondering, just so we can continue to kind of march through on a second iteration, and we'll continue to iterate this for the month of January. I think this list is pretty extensive, and rather than here and now trying to figure out what's at the top, which I think is some of what this argument is about, as which are things that are not quite as essential, but are essential, if you can make that distinction. That I'd like to put that aside. We've got a list. I want to keep open the generation of more items for this list, but we'll keep this as our list. Ginger's going to update it with some of the suggestions that we've had, and I'd welcome thoughts, but I'll spend some time over the next few weeks before we meet again figuring out a process where we could begin to determine what we think are should be at the top of our list, and which might be further down that would reflect that. But if people are okay with that, I'll do a last call for a new item for this list, and then we're going to go on to the next slide. Last call. Okay, I'm going to take silence as a chance to move forward on this. Great. This is the base. Let me stop right here just for a second, Ginger, just to call out. People have said these items for the base. I believe all of these were on our list. So I don't know that we need to comment on this, but that's what, just to call people's attention to it. These are resources consistently named in public feedback. In your subcommittee, provide feedback on the components of this list that you support. That's what we've just done. These are, I believe, all 5 things we've talked about. Ginger, that sound okay? Move on to the next one, or should we do something else?
Dan?
Yeah.
Should we consider here adding reading coaches, since we are focused on literacy and early efforts around that? Should we consider throwing that on here as a must-have in the base for every underperforming school to really focus what Katie was talking about, those high-quality instructional items facilitated and delivered by actual reading coaches? Because that's not the case, I would assume, across schools. I know here in Knox County, for the most part, they're funding through federal dollars and not the state.
Can we go back to the list there, Ginger? I think we've got coaches, but not literacy coaches. Is that your point, Chris? I think so.
Yeah, that are guaranteed to be at schools, again, because now they're funded by the federal allocation.
So, yeah, okay. Ginger, can we get that in? And Ginger, you put something up as a suggestion. Do you want to speak to that?
Yes, so what I put in the chat just now is the list that you all just created of the additions to the list I was displaying on the screen, so that you could see those things and you can let me know if I missed anything. So I will add those to the list that you've been looking at on the screen. And then I'll also add the suggestion that Chris just made of reading coaches. And to clarify that, Chris, did you say reading coaches for underperforming schools or reading coaches in general?
I guess the home run would be at every school, but I think I could settle for underperforming schools, unless anyone else has something to say on that. It was done this a little longer in Tennessee.
Okay. We'll move to the next. Thanks.
Okay, and so just a note on this slide quickly. So we are in agreement with all of the items that are on here. So I can put that over as part of our recommendation that, we agree these are base items. These would be those must-have items. And then this group can then continue to narrow down the list of what else we would put as, a must-have for this base, which would be those items that we believe to hold true for all kids or need to be present for all students. So we can come back to that part as we continue to refine this list. And then we'll move to one that probably will lead to a little more discussion, which are those weights.
Yes. So just as a frame, the feedback so far has identified 7 possible areas for weights. And depending on how you count, it might be 8. Economically disadvantaged and or concentration of poverty, students with disabilities, English language learners, rural schools, schools where there's a widely spread apart sparsity schools, fast-growing schools, and charter enrollment. Those are the 7, but there are also other possibilities: gifted, students with dyslexia, small school system size, and the K-12 small class size are all possible areas for weight. I guess, do we agree with the 7? Are there any that we might push out? Of the other suggestions, do we want to push them on? And is there something nobody's thought of that we want to generate and add to our list?
Sometimes economically disadvantaged or concentration of poverty is used as a proxy, but I wonder if we should include something around prior achievement, so that if a student is not on grade level in literacy, for instance, that that student is weighted higher. Occasionally, I've seen states and districts use economic disadvantage as that proxy, but I'm not sure if we should call it out or not.
To clarify, Katie, that could be any student, regardless of family income?
Yeah, what I was saying is that could be any student. Some districts, including including Nashville, has used economically disadvantaged as that proxy, but it's not one-to-one all the time.
Right.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
Tell me what sparsity means to you.
Ginger, would you, maybe if you don't mind, can I broaden the question to, would you distinguish between rural and sparsity? The commissioner
Yes.
did a nice job of that, and I can't repeat it.
Mm-hmm. So when we think of rural, we're thinking about, we're using that federal definition of that. And so federally, that's defined as a defined different distance from like a city center, a larger city. So I'm not sure where you are, Lisa, but in East Tennessee, several people probably know where Knoxville is, and they may also know where Campbell County is. And that was the example the commissioner used. You know, those Campbell County might not fall into that rural definition because of their proximity to Knoxville. And so it's really thinking about that distance from like a larger city center. So we do use that federal definition for rural. When we think about sparsity, that is really thinking about how the population is dispersed within a district. And so for sparsity, that often does represent some transportation issues. There could be additional transportation cost because of how the population is spread throughout that community, throughout that district. And so you could have a district that is both rural and they also have sparsity issues, or there could be one or the other happening within that district. And so those have been split apart because that has been something that's come up through feedback, that those are not the same thing. And those are things that districts have to deal with based on, you know, where they are, their proximity to city, as well as how their population is dispersed throughout that county or city, town, what have you. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Dan, I have a question too. The rationale behind increasing weight for charter enrollment.
I don't know that I have any information on like the rationale behind that, like where all that surfaced. But the charter schools do fall within their the public school or public district that they fall under. So, but I'm not sure which groups, you know, different ones, because this is feedback that's coming from town halls, subcommittees, emails, you know, that we've received and all of that. So I don't really have any background information on that one that I can share. You may find some information as you look through that feedback that might help provide some clarity on that one.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it if we could find more information about that. I don't want to overstep what I should be doing, but I was wondering why that was included as a weight, and would question it until I understand it more.
I would totally agree with that. That was my next question.
Thank you, Lisa. Good, we're on the same wavelength here. Do we feel, let me push us a little bit, the list below, the gifted, dyslexia, K2 small class size, are those things that we want to include on this list? Senator?
I didn't have a comment on
Sorry.
this. I have to do the original list because frequently the economic disadvantaged and concentration of poverty, there's an inverse relationship in that with the fast growing counties. And probably if you looked at the fastest growing counties in the state, we're talking about some of those in Middle Tennessee, such as Williamson County, Rutherford County, you know, maybe Wilson County, but also some of those counties are the wealthiest in the state. And should they be, I'm not sure exactly what this means, but if you're looking at the BEP, should those wealthiest counties, such as Williamson County, should they be receiving a higher proportion of, because they're fast growing? Now, that's not to say they don't have problems, because they sometimes can't build schools fast enough. But should they get an advantage in the BEP as opposed to Lake County, which certainly isn't growing at the same rate that Williamson County is, and it certainly doesn't have the same income level?
Yeah. Let's get some more information on that, and we're going to have an opportunity for our next meeting to ask some questions of one of the certified experts, and maybe that's one of the questions we'd want to ask is what I've heard, as I'm sure as you've heard, the issue is about buildings oftentimes and staffing ahead of the need, and that's how I think that got on the list in part.
Yeah, and I will say that I'm sitting in
Murfreesboro, yeah.
At the middle of the highest growing county. So growth does make a big difference to our school districts, because it is hard to keep up when you get the growth money after the kids are already here, because we have to provide all of those resources to those children, and you have to get it quickly. So growth, and the other part of it is, I would say Murfreesboro gets ranked all the time as one of the top cities to live in the nation. But when you look at our poverty, that we have that true inner city. I mean, we have 8 of our schools are title schools. It's not just always wealthy that's coming in. We have to deal with everyone. A lot of ESL, and ESL does not mean wealth typically.
Dan, maybe I'm pushing you a little bit here, but I'm wondering if you wanted to make a comment on the K2 small class size.
Well, obviously, I think that's important, but I just think class size itself all the way through is important. I started my teaching career with 42 fifth graders, if you can imagine. So, I've seen where that's at. 25 to 30 is a much more manageable number, but I could not imagine having more than 20 or 25 in a K2 classroom, especially without a paraprofessional in there or anything.
Do you want to argue for it being weighted?
I don't know that I would argue for it being weighted. I just think that's probably something that needs to be just hey, your class size needs to be this in these areas.
All right. So it feels like I'm not hearing any new. We're going to run out of time very quickly. I'll try this out. Are we comfortable with this? We want to get more information on fast growing and charter enrollment, whether they stay on the list and what they are. Would we want to keep the 5 that are there in the, first of all, we want to keep them, and is that the right order?
I don't know, Dan. I think we need more information on fast growing and charter enrollment. I think, one of our members provided some good info on fast growing, and I can recognize those issues. But in order to move any others into the top 7, I think we need a little more information on those.
Makes sense. Other comments? A comment I'd make, I think students with disabilities, so I think there's a question here of both prioritization and weight, right? And within the disabilities, different disabilities require different weights, different levels of disability. So I think students with disabilities maybe require the greatest weight or not, depending on the level of disability. So I think it's hard to know exactly where that would fit, but I wanted to call that out. All right, so we have a list here. We aren't going to add anything to it. We're going to get a little more information. We'll have to come back and decide if it's the right prioritization. And at some point, and Ginger, tell me if I'm wrong here, we're going to have to figure out the weights, or is that not our purview?
More information to come on that. So hold tight. I do want to ask one clarification. So Katie brought up earlier the idea of the prior performance piece as potentially a weight. Is that something that you all want to discuss as potentially an addition here?
I'd love to get more information on it. If we have opportunity to do that, I'd love more information. And Katie, you can be the information provider, or we can ask the question of someone else.
I don't have much more to provide for this meeting, but I'm happy to go out and gather some more information on it. I'm curious that it hasn't come up in other conversations, that it didn't rise to other conversations, levels. So that's curious for me, but I can certainly find out some more information and bring that back to the next meeting.
Great.
Okay, so for this group, just to summarize, we agree with the bullets for the most part, but we want additional information on charter enrollment, on fast growing, and then we also want to gather some more information on the idea of prior performance of students and potentially add that in the future. Is that correct? Okay.
What's the will of, thank you, everybody. What's the will of the group? We have two more areas that we were, I think, additional dollars and outcomes. Or at some point, we're going to run out of time without some extra meetings, I suspect. Do we want to stay? Can everybody stay, or most everybody stay and do additional dollars? And then we'll put outcomes for the next meeting. Do you want to stop right now and figure we'll pay that price later on with another meeting?
I like this group of people. I would be willing to add another meeting if we needed to. I think I'll tell you what, the discussion is very enlightening for me. So I would do either, Dan. I think, the will of the group here, but I would certainly offer my time.
I'll ask forgiveness of the group. I am going to have to jump off in a couple minutes myself, so forgive me, but whatever the decision, I've got to get off, so I apologize.
So can I bargain this one? Could we all put aside an hour and a half for our meeting in January, and we will start with additional dollars and outcomes. And I'll send you an email. Actually, Ginger is, as you know, on it, and we'll get all this done. But we'll get this out to you about what the charge is. I also would like to suggest to the group, if we take an hour to do our work, the last half hour, we would have an expert from the department in, and the expert would stay for as long as we wanted. So if we had questions beyond even the hour and a half, the expert would stay. But, and if people had to leave within the hour and a half, they wouldn't have to stay for the expert. We'll send out a request to you for questions so that the expert from the department could be best prepared. But that's what I'm thinking. We'll start the meeting with these two items, outcomes and additional dollars. We will all have looked at all the information we get, and it's going to be a lot. Ginger, you showed me how to access the information, and yeah, do you want to show that? Can you do that quickly, so folks who, if you haven't already done it, it was unfortunately it was a learning for me. I hadn't figured it out.
Yes. So inside your invitation for the meeting, if I can get an invitation pulled up really quickly, you have a link to the larger Google Drive. So this top link will take you to the overall Google Drive for all the subcommittees. So you can see all of them here, as well as some additional information. If you click on our subcommittee group, it will take you to each meeting folder. So this has all of our materials for this meeting. And then you also have this public comments folder, which is what I emailed the other night about. So if you click in our meeting 3, this Education Foundation's meeting 3.pdf is the PowerPoint that we have been looking at. So you can go back and reference that and be looking ahead to what those the outcome slide, as well as the additional funding slide, what has already surfaced across all of the public comment feedback, what's surfacing there, and start forming your thoughts about, what you might want to add, what you agree with, what you don't agree with there. So those are handy for you. And then we'll also be adding the materials for meeting 4 in the meeting 4 folder. And then I'll send you guys an email as soon as we have those loaded, so you'll know that they're there.
Ginger, would you also show you showed me how to do the public comments and also how they're coded so we know which ones are particularly for us?
Yes. So when you open sorry, I clicked through that pretty quickly. When you open the public comments folder, there is a comment tracker. You'll see a comments PDF. So the PDFs are, as emails come through, those have been PDF'd. If there's other documents and things, you'll see those in there as well. There's also a handy instructions and overview document. So start with that instructions and overview document and then jump into the materials. I'm going to open this tracker. Inside the tracker, you'll see how each of the documents or pieces of feedback has been coded. You'll see information about each piece of those documents, but if you scroll all the way to the right, sorry, I'm making you a little dizzy there. Try to make this a little bit bigger. You can see in column, where are we? Education Foundations. Y'all are probably seeing it before I am. Oh, there we are. In column W, you'll see that all of these pieces of feedback have been coded for which subcommittees they are most relevant to. So you can go over to the Education Foundations group and then see which pieces of this feedback are the most relevant. And within this, if there are comments that have been made during town halls, you will be able to see that transcribed within this document. There are also links that you can click on to actually go over and see the actual town hall, the piece of the town hall where these comments are made. Same thing for social media posts during the Twitter town halls. You'll see that transcribed in here as well. So hopefully all of that's helpful.
How many comments so far?
This is through, you'll notice the date up here. This is through November 2nd. Let's see. Looks like 279 is what's in here at this point.
But this is December 8th.
Yes, so they are working away at getting additional, they have additional feedback throughout November that will be loaded in here soon. And so you all will be getting an updated version of this as they, again, go through, read everything, try to figure out which subcommittee it's most relevant to, get all of that transcribed, and then we'll pass that on to you guys.
So that's some of our homework over the next 4 weeks is to try and get through as much of that as we can. There's a lot, but that will inform our conversation on the 6th of the new year. So that's my thought for the next meeting. We'll do those next 2 sections. We'll have access to an expert. Anything else from anybody, Ginger?
I think that's it.
All right, everybody. Thanks very much. Thanks for your time and your work, and I hope everybody just has wonderful holidays and maybe even a few minutes to rest and relax. And if not, I'll see everybody next year. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Take care.
guys.
Stay well.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Ginger.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.
Bye, guys.